right, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to get a response, general response to some of the specific questions that have been asked, and then I'm going to ask my panelists in their response to then also conclude. Okay? Gul, I'll start with you.
All right. Look, this has been quite useful, especially for me, because I've not quite taken part in a debate quite like this. So thank you all for your various questions, suggestions, and thoughts. I think that you have to take seriously that people who are in business see their future and their success in this country, and that if the country doesn't work, actually business can't work. Business cannot be an island of prosperity when the country fundamentally doesn't work. So the political context within which business is done is critical. This is why we engage. Otherwise, we'd sit in our offices and do what we do all day and not bother about it. So that needs to come across, I think, and hasn't come across strongly enough. In the positioning paper that William wrote, there is quite a symbiotic relationship in all of the development plans and processes that will be successful that he's written about. And in my mind, as I said, talking about listening to what people were saying here, was this notion of culture and to what degree that either plays for the NDP or against the NDP. And we haven't really even touched on that. So if you think of the Korean example, for instance, you have in government and in business the same people, in essence. They went to the same schools, they imbibed the same air, they have the same dreams and ambitions for their country. And so the wavelength from which they embark on these processes is the same. So that is done. We are not there in South Africa today. We have to be quite honest and say, why would a South African worker who's worked for 40 years in the mining sector, seen exploitation in the first 20, now turn around and trust that the system will look after him in the next 20 because there's been a change. So culturally, there is still such a distance that needs to be traveled, but we don't have the mechanism to travel that distance. So part of the plea, for example, from my colleague on the left to say, let's start on this and we'll catch each other on the way, is because in a way, the NDP might give us the vehicle that will start to get a metal across the fences and start to mend fences, because we have never done that piece in our reconciliation effort where people start to mend fences and get the trust thing going. Now, we know in the business side that there's always this trust deficit between government and business that we've been trying to heal. We don't have the mechanism to do that. So to imagine that we could take a 30-year plan, those numbers again, was it 30 or 20, was it, Neil? We can take a 30-year plan and have absolute complete consensus on year 3 is not realistic. Given that that's an ambition that's 10 years out, what do we do in the meantime to get there? Because if all we do is get in a room and bicker, well, actually we're not going to make progress. So to open up the space, to start taking tentative steps, to implement what has a reasonable, maybe even a modest chance of success, makes sense despite all of the difficulties and the fundamental flaws and the structural weaknesses that have been debated today. Frankly, we don't have time. So people who say, well, let's talk some more, let's get in a room, get CODESA going in the economic front, I hear that. But the fact of the matter is that this is not an economy in good shape. This is not a society in good shape. And we do not have the time. And how one injects a sense of urgency about what we're doing is a real frustration for me. You know, you think of Japan, they'd just come out of the war. They thought they were going to basically be extinct as a society, I don't know. And so that gave them the energy to mobilize whatever resources they needed. They didn't like the idea that some of their rights may be suppressed, but the goal that it was being suppressed for was larger. And as South Africans, we seem to still think we have all the time in the world. So if I leave you with nothing else from where we sit, we think that the country has run out of time for debate and really does have to take action to solve these huge problems that we face. Thank you.
I'm going to finish with you. Yeah. You go, and then on you, and then we'll finish.
Yeah, firstly, a couple of comments have been made about COSATU and the state of the Federation, which are quite justifiable. I think we understand people's disappointment. Someone was saying they regarded COSATU as the voice of the voiceless. Tragic to see it's disintegrating. Disintegrating is too strong a word. I think there's serious, serious problems in the organization. And we can react in two ways. The one is an opportunistic way to say, good, we can move in this creative space. Let's trash the organization. And I think we've seen what the cost that society pays if we just look at Marikana. And we see what happens when a vacuum is created and chaos emerges. The other response is to say, let's reinstate COSATU as the organization that we know, the voice of the voiceless, as someone put it. And we're working hard to try and do that. And obviously, to the extent that we can get support for that, we would appreciate it. I think that we must avoid descending into platitudes when we discuss these issues. You know, leaking ships and other things, with all due respect. I think we're dealing with very concrete challenges, very concrete social problems, structural economic challenges, which we spoke about at the beginning. And we need to be both hard-nosed, as Adam's saying, but also scientific. Actually address what is the nature of what is the problem with our mineral sector? Why is it that our minerals are being shipped out of the country en masse? Why are we not beneficiating? Why are we not moving downstream and upstream? Why have the very detailed and coherent proposals of the ANC and the Sims report on minerals not been implemented? It's because of vested interests and power relations in this country. It's much too simple for these mining companies to move out en masse, what Billiton, Anglo-American, and the others have done. The idea that they're patriotic and committed to this country is nonsense. If they were committed to this country, they would be investing in this country. They wouldn't have moved out and set up their beneficiation operations in Canada, South America, and Europe. So I think we need to start talking truth to power and to start identifying the fact that there are going to have to be some hard discussions about changing the structure of this economy. And that absolutely has to happen. The idea that time has run out, we agree. Time ran out 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But dealing with the problem of time running out by implementing the completely opposite and wrong policies is simply going to make the situation worse and drive us deeper into crisis. As Dale said, we'll sit 20 years down the line with an even worse scenario in terms of our development. We've got some good plans and policies, some of which, by the way, Graham, COSATU very strongly contributed towards. And some of the issues that we've been putting forward around industrial policy, around some other areas, around local procurement, etc., government has taken on board. But the problem is that there's centers of power within government, and the elephant in the room is the National Treasury, which is completely a law unto itself, as acts to constantly contradict and sabotage and undermine those policies. So yes, there has to be coherence, but there has to be coherence around a vision that we all support. And finally, on the issue of force us into an agreement, I agree with you, but you've got to look at the history of social dialogue over the last 15 to 20 years. There's been no seriousness on the part of business. I'm sorry to have to say this. There's been no seriousness. I've sat in the Job Summit in 1998. We had the Growth and Development Summit in 2003, in which there was an agreement to channel 5% of investable assets into productive investment, have been completely ignored by business. Government hasn't taken forward the commitments. Again, it's a question of power and interests, power relations and interests. So yes, what your question is, what must be done? Society, like you were trying to do, needs to put pressure on all of us to say that we can't sit with this situation, we can't continue to sit with this crisis while it's exploding around our ears. And we need a type of an agreement that is going to move our country forward. And if the NDP discussion does anything, if it allows us to have a meaningful debate around those issues, then I think it will have served its purpose.
So I want to start where Dale McKinley asked the question earlier on. And what he said was that South Africa has really the core problems of South Africa lie in the structure of the economy and in the extractive mineral energy complex and the mode of capitalist development that it's allowed. Now, he's right. He's absolutely right. This is the dilemma. As much as I've said to business, Labour's not going to give up the LRA, whether you want them to do it or not. It's a bit crazy for us to think that we're going to convince capitalists to give up capitalism. That's not going to happen. That's not the game plan. So the question is, we have to kind of figure out where do we go from here. And the model I start looking at is what happened in many parts of the world, which is not a revolution that overthrew capitalism, but the emergence of a pragmatic deal between the social partners that established some form of social democracy. And that some form of social democracy is at the heart and vision of the NDP, and it's fundamentally at the heart and vision of the Freedom Charter. So the question is, how do we go there? And how do you convince the various social actors that that's the only opportunity available? And for me, you use the example of Japan. When Japan was utterly devastated, the society said, we actually have to cut this deal. When you went, there's a case of Switzerland, or large parts of Western Europe. When Western Europe was devastated by war, and in a context when elites found that there was a danger that there was going to be a revolution, those same capitalist elites decided to partner labor and establish a social democratic political economy that made some concessions to labor, but that allowed for the regulated market economy to exist. That's the example I look at. Now, the core problem in our society is political instability. You can't deal with it. You can't deal with anything else unless you deal with political instability. And my analysis and many others suggest that the causal factor of political instability is inequality. If you do not deal with inequality, you do not deal with political instability. And if you do not deal with political instability, nothing else plays. And I look at the examples where you were successful in dealing with inequality. Brazil, in the last 10 years, but the example petered out because the Brazilian economy went into a crisis. Western Europe in the post-Second World War period. Parts of examples 65 to 80 in Southeast Asia. Those are the examples. And I say, what are the lessons from those examples for us today? They can't be applied blindly. Obviously, we've got a very different context. But we have to understand them, apply them, and see what is practical today. And that's what I'm arguing for as we go forward. And that's what is not happening. That is not what is being dealt with. I think you can moderate wage expectations. But you have to start at the elites first before you go down. And unless you do that, it's not going to happen. That's the danger that we confront. Now, I want to end with this question. I think somebody asked, what happens if we can't cut the deal? And I want to answer that. What happens if we can't cut the deal is this economy will stagnate. The political instabilities will continue, and we will have the next 10 years exactly what has happened in the last 3. What's worse is what Dale McKinley suggested. That's an unsustainable project for the next 20, 30 years. What will happen in 10 years is eventually these violent protests will coalesce in some form, and there will be a revolution. And the message, and that's why I speak to business. I go to business and I speak to them. And I say, you got a choice. Your choice is not to cut the deal. Your choice is either cut the deal or you lose the whole bloody castle. That's your choice in the society. Because if you don't, we're all in trouble. And that's the big danger. Now, there are comrades of mine who think, well, that's exactly what you want. Don't let them cut the deal. Let's have the glorious revolution, and then we'll build a society. There's one danger with that. The revolutions are always followed by 20 years of mayhem, maybe 30, 40 years. I think I'd rather do what the Europeans and what the Japanese did. And that's the big challenge that confronts South Africa today. That's the challenge that confronts political elites. I think the economic elites today in South Africa confront the same challenge that the economic elites confronted in Western Europe in the early parts of in the immediate afterpart of the Second World War. And as those elites made the courage, and had the courage to cut the deal, that's the challenge that confronts CEOs today. Don't cut the deal, you lose everything, and we all lose everything. That's the challenge. And that's where I think we're heading if we don't cut the deal. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I just want to say that to Graham that contrary to what he said, I don't believe that government will do everything. And it certainly is, the NDP recognizes the fact that if we think that any one sector of society will take us forward, we'll be fooling ourselves. Our solution to our problems require all of us to work together. It's not easy. It's hard work. But we need to get to a point where we say we need to fix this because we all stand to lose. There's not going to be a winner if we do not solve the problems that confront us. I'm encouraged by the fact that we've spent this time debating, robustly so. I think we should continue, but I also think that the basis for moving forward is also to be willing to give up something. If all we do is we meet time and again, we simply restate where we stand and are not prepared to make any concession to be able to move forward, we will lose time. As I've said, and this is no statement on the part of government to try and force things or anything like that. But of course, the country continues to run. And about 70% or so of the NDP is about fixing programs that are already running. It's not about introducing new programs. And so what we're doing when we talk about implementing the NDP is to make sure that the 24 or 26,000 schools in this country run and provide good education to the 13 million children of South Africa. That cannot wait. We've got to find solutions as we go along. Luckily, even Satu from COSATU agrees with us on this. Is part of processes that try to implement improvements in education. And the same is true in various other sectors because there is not going to be a point where somebody blows a whistle and says, start. We've got to make sure that we fix things as we go along. So I'm encouraged by this, but I think that we need to do more than call for going back to the drawing board. We need to understand that all of the things that we're debating, all of the things that we're talking about are actually happening. We need to fix things. We need to slow down inequality. We need to change, in fact, reduce inequality. We need to change the structure of the economy while it is running. We need to make sure that we call the people that need to cut the deal to sit around the table, cut the deal as we proceed. So I want us to be in the right frame of mind that says, the country continues to run, lives continue to go forward, and therefore we cannot expect that things will stop, we'll sort out everything and then say, okay, now we can start. Now we've got something that we all agree with, let's now start and move forward. It doesn't work like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor William Gumede's research paper, if you didn't get it, will be available online tomorrow. The website is www.wsg.wits.ac.za, and just look under research on the home menu if you didn't pick it up today. Please welcome to the stage Professor Anne McLellan, who is going to deliver the vote of thanks for us today.
I just want to say thanks again to Siki for excellent moderating, to the panelists, and to all of you, because I think if one message comes clearly from this discussion, it's first of all that we need to talk to each other and not past each other, because when we talk past each other, there's no way of meeting midway to try and build some of the trust that needs to be built. I think the second message is that we need to get moving. And the third message maybe is that perhaps we need to cut a deal. So just finally to say thanks in particular to William Gumedi for doing the research paper, which will be on the website. And if you don't remember the address, you just need to look for Wits School of Governance, and it'll be on the website either under research or events. This event is listed there. And also that the COSATU paper will be posted there as well. So for those of you who want to get that, you'll be able to do that. To all our panelists, again, thank you. To you for being here on a luckily not so chilly winter evening. To our partners, the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, and all those people who were involved in the various discussions and operational planning, to the steering committee, which includes Cas Kuvadia and others, and then to all the various marketing, media, admin support, project management people at WITS in general and at the WITS School of Governance. I think that this has been a great start to the debate series. The next debate, so keep a lookout, will be in early September, and the debate after that will be in early November. And on that note, if you aren't on our mailing list, in other words, didn't receive a direct email invitation, and you want to be invited to the rest of the debates, could you please make sure you leave either a business card or or write. Use that old-fashioned utensil called a pen, and write your name and email address outside at the table. I think just finally, before I ask you all to give everyone a good round of applause and leave, I think the other message that comes out here is that each of us need to take responsibility for making the development plan work. It can't work with one sector pushing on its own. And so perhaps the challenge is, as we think about how we move forward on implementing this debate, is to think what role we each can play in making South Africa that vision, that 2030 vision that's outlined in the debate. So thank you very much, and good night.